In the first part of this documentary, I investigated the progression of Amy Schumer's comedy career. We witnessed her transition from a small-time female comic telling racist jokes into a leather-clad land manatee shouting about her enormous pussy while making crazy faces. The timing of that video may have been slightly inopportune. As I was nearly finished editing, Schumer revealed that she would be releasing another special on Netflix. However, the topic of growing may be better suited to this video, because more than any of her other specials, it illustrates the increasingly political nature of Amy Schumer. Unfortunately, it's the most bargain bin rich white feminist rhetoric you can imagine.
Right before I got pregnant, I noticed how ashamed we've all been made to feel about getting our period. Like the second you get it, your mom goes, "You're a woman now." And that's disgusting. Why are we made to feel so ashamed of our unnatural bodily function that ultimately brings life? You know, it's like, then you kind of lean in, and then we don't even say the whole sentence. We kind of go, "Does anybody have a
This is just the annoying and stupid part of Amy's political humor, though. There is a part of this special that is downright enraging if you're a compassionate person or an egalitarian of any kind. It also shows how uninformed and out of her depth Amy is with social and political issues. Amy begins the segment by saying that it's a scary time for men.
I don't know what I'm having. I hope it's a girl. But really just because it's such a scary time for men.
Where she really goes off the rails with this bit is that she uses it to mock the fact that men fear ridicule.
And there was a study done, and it said that women mostly fear violence. That's our number one fear. And the same study showed that men's number one fear was ridicule. I'm so sorry, I didn't know you guys were going through that. Do you guys run home 'cause you're afraid of somebody telling a little jokey about you?
What Amy doesn't understand, probably because she has never looked up any evidence that runs counter to her political perspective, is that she is making light of an extremely serious issue. The life expectancy in America has actually dropped in recent years, and a huge factor in this decline has been the frightening rise in substance abuse and suicide, especially among white men. The CDC estimated that between 1999 and 2016, the suicide rate in America rose 25%. Suicide has become the 10th leading cause of death nationwide, and the second leading cause of death among people aged 15 to 34. In every age group, men are nearly 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in 2017, white males made up 69.67% of suicide deaths, with middle-aged white men having the highest suicide rate in the country. By mocking the fears of white men, she is trivializing literally the worst mental health crisis in the entire United States. It's about as heartless as looking at the statistic that 1 out of every 3 women will be assaulted and saying, why didn't they just train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I'm gonna break the neck. Two-way action.
Maybe Amy doesn't know about the staggeringly high suicide rates among white men. Maybe she doesn't care. Maybe it's a mix of the two. I can't rule anything out, but what I can say is that the amount of time spent discussing political and social issues on growing is a pretty substantial new development for Amy Schumer. As far as comedians go, Amy's routine has never been very political. She always expressed a few vaguely feminist ideas, but they were usually accompanied by her persona of the hot girl who swears a lot. It wasn't really until Live at the Apollo that she added any direct political or social commentary to her act, and that was in reference to the unrealistic beauty standards presented in the Kevin James movie, Zookeeper.
Rosario Dawson is just like working at the zoo, just like sweeping up koala shit. Like, please fuck me, Kevin James. Like, that movie's about talking animals. There's a beaver and a penguin that are friends and talk about opening a bed and breakfast, but that's not the most unrealistic part of that movie.
On the leather special, Amy does have a bit about gun control, which is overly long, beaten into the ground, and contains unnecessary jokes about sex.
What? What's next? You want us to fuck animals? I'm like, I've been fucking animals my whole life, sir.
It is still a fairly isolated moment in an otherwise apolitical special about cum, pussies, and diarrhea. There is a significant element of political and social commentary on Inside Amy Schumer, but it's debatable how much control Amy had over the writing or creative direction of the show. Nevertheless, the praise these sketches received may have been enough to convince Amy that she should try her hand at real-world political activism, but I doubt she needed that much convincing to begin with. Amy has always maintained a level of entitlement comparable to Veruca Salt. This is a woman who shoplifted over $100,000 worth of merchandise during her early adulthood. She was arrested for stealing from Bloomingdale's on grand larceny charges, which were only reduced because she shared a name with Chuck Schumer. She admits she didn't even feel bad about stealing because she was stealing from a big corporation, not a small store. She claims stealing was a rush for her, and a physical addiction. It does make me wonder why she didn't use that excuse when she was caught stealing jokes. Her rapid rise in fame probably didn't help her entitlement either. In 3 years, she went from warming up for a bug chaser to starring in her own TV show. 2 years later, she was starring in a major motion picture directed by one of the most prominent comedy directors of the last 20 years. She tries to act like an average Joe who gets photographed in sweatpants, but the truth is, she's the kind of person who throws a temper tantrum when gym employees don't recognize her. With that kind of mentality, is it surprising that she bullies other comedians like Brendan Sagalow? Sagalow made headlines in 2018 when Amy interrupted his set at Caroline's to practice her monologue for Saturday Night Live. He later documented the event in an episode of his podcast, and also discussed them with Louis J. Gomez, Big J. Okerson, and Ari Shaffir during an appearance on Legion of Skanks.
So, all right, so what happens now? You're on stage, and what happens?
And I'm like, I'm doing a little bit of crowd work, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just about to get into it, and then I just hear, Brendan, it's Amy Schumer, can I do 10? And I was like, yeah, of course, sure.
Wait,
like,
do you know her at all?
No, not at all.
Hold on. So you're on stage, just getting into your act, and you hear this from side
From
stage?
the side, yeah, where you like go in.
In the aftermath, Brendan claimed that he wasn't mad at Amy for interrupting his set, and I believe him. Amy's arrogance took Sagalow from virtually unknown comic to international headline overnight. It's understandable that he might not be mad at Amy Schumer for unintentionally boosting his profile 100-fold, but there is one more dimension to the story. During the Legion of Skanks appearance, Brendan revealed that he had received some unusual messages from Amy.
Finally, she goes on, I know cuckolded. Kurt Metzger and I have been through this. I think you have the capacity.
Kurt Metzger has gotten cussed by me.
I've
been through this.
I think you have the capacity to have a great long career. I want to encourage you to keep going. Take acting classes and don't be a part of anything that could hurt you down the road.
That was the threat.
Like the Legion of Skanks
That was the thing that I was like, yeah, I know. That was the thing that I was like,
immediately
did
went
she
against that advice.
just threaten me?
Yeah, she did.
Oh my God.
Then she goes, would you change the name of that podcast and spell my name right if you don't mind? Otherwise, it seems like you're upset about it.
Wow.
Caroline?
What?
Yeah.
She actually, Amy Schumer actually
and
cares?
guess how much of a cuck I am?
Fuck.
I did it.
Whatever.
I changed it.
Dude,
He
fuck.
changed
What'd you change the name to?
Arnie Schumer.
I changed it to the I'm Not Mad at Amy Schumer episode.
Really?
Yeah, because she was like, you're making it everybody seem mad, blah, blah, blah. Did that.
She really
Did you send her a
does,
link?
for all reputation, have the capacity to be like, I need to shut you
She
down.
subscribes now.
Getting a talking to from Amy or her people appears to be a very real thing for other comedians. To those of us on the outside, it looks like comedians are tiptoeing around Amy like they're walking through a minefield in Cambodia. From Amy's perspective, it might just seem like all of her friends and peers agree with her on everything. When your ideas never face any resistance, you can develop pretty wacky notions about your capabilities. I'm speculating, but I think this mentality is what led Amy to involve herself in politics. The first major instance of which came on the heels of a shooting during a screening of the movie Trainwreck that took the lives of 2 of Amy's fans. It would be cynical for me to say that Amy used the murders of 2 innocent women as a springboard into mainstream politics. That being said, Amy did team up with her relative, Chuck Schumer, to propose gun control legislation, a move they dubbed a crusade on guns, and which Amy promoted using the hashtag #AimingForChange. Tasteful, Schooms. Very tasteful. As far as I know, their efforts went nowhere, but Amy continued to tackle the topic of gun control. She referred to politicians as cowards for refusing to vote in favor of stricter gun regulation, and devoted skits on Inside Amy Schumer to the legal loopholes related to gun shows. While her attempt to push gun control legislation was a failure, it may have only emboldened her political aspirations. During the 2016 election, it wasn't much of a surprise that she backed Hillary Clinton. Even with Schumer's support, Hillary still lost the election. There was one particularly interesting moment that came out of the two joining forces, though. It occurred during one of Schumer's shows that took place in Tampa, shortly before the election.
I'm Amy.
Dave.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. I really look forward to talking to you about this. Okay, just so you know, I appreciate you coming up. I am in no way trying to shame you. This isn't going to be a rally for either of us. I just really want to know. So tell me why Trump has your vote.
Because I can't trust Hillary.
Okay, that's... Okay. And why can you trust Trump?
I'm a rhino, which is a Republican name only, and I haven't voted for a Republican since Reagan. But now I have totally flipped, and so she has...
No, we're not talking about why you don't like Hillary. We're talking about why you like Trump.
I think right now, security for the country is probably the biggest thing that we have, and he's going to protect us with regards to...
With all of his experience with signing ceasefires and... Do you get worried at all? I hope you guys are focused. It's cool to talk about this. Do you get worried at all with how impulsive he is, that he gets so fired up from Saturday Night Live doing a skit on him, and like the stuff he's talking about with leaving NAFTA and everything, like, do you get worried he'll be impulsive and get us in a lot of fucking trouble we can't get out of?
Well, I'm an attorney, so I get really scared when I hear some of the stuff he says, but I'm not really voting for Trump, I'm voting against him.
Okay, you can go sit down. So thank you, I appreciate that. That's what I thought. Does anyone, he's going to be able to protect us. Okay, so we won't get any more into it. I really appreciate that. That was just cool to hear one guy who doesn't seem like a psychopath, why he would want to vote for that orange, sexual assaulting, fake college starting monster.
I know Amy was just trying to dunk on Trump by wrecking one of his followers with sick logic. In the process, she pulled a man out of the crowd under the pretense of having a polite discussion, then shamed him in front of hundreds of people, and then had him thrown off the stage. Picture a male comic like Bill Burr calling a female Hillary supporter up on stage to answer for herself. Then he mansplains that she's giving the wrong answers and has her removed. The response would be fucking biblical. But it was a different story for Schumer. Articles covering the incident mentioned 200 people walking out of the show because Amy started getting political, but tried to spin it as Amy taking on Trump, when really she was just humiliating some guy. What I find really striking about this fucking disaster is just how poorly Amy comes across in the sense of a political debate. This was her plan. She had control over everything and, presumably, some idea of what she wanted to say beforehand. In the moment, the best she could manage was stumbling through orange, sexual assaulting, fake college starting monster. Whenever I hear Amy talk about politics or society, I come away with the sense that all of her opinions were taken secondhand from friends, fellow comedians, and other Hollywood elites. Moreover, it seems like she has never faced any kind of opposing viewpoint or challenge to her ideology. Just watch the way she falls apart during an argument with Joe Rogan about the first season of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
You know, I don't always agree with Jerry Seinfeld, but one thing that Jerry Seinfeld said that I really do agree with, someone was talking about diversity in comedy, and he was like, look, this is all I speak, it's funny. I want to know what's funny. Like, what I think is, if people are funny. If they're men, if they're women, if they're black, if they're white, he goes, I just like funny.
I think that the conversation was with Colin Quinn when he was talking about why he had no women or black people on the first season of his writing in Cars with Comedians, and it's like, funny is funny, but are you looking for what's fun? Are you? I don't think of, do you have your hand on the pulse of whose stand up are you going down to watch?
Who?
From the beginning, you can tell that Amy has less than half of an idea of what she's talking about, but is already passing moral judgments on Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
He goes, all I care about is funny.
I think you're like that. I think I'm like that.
You don't think he's like that?
No, I don't know. I have no idea. But what I'm saying is, I think that's what he was talking about was Colin I'm telling him like you can't just like have all.
No, it was
the way
actually
through
an
time.
interview. It was an interview where
No,
they were
it was on
asking him
Stern.
in an interview.
It was
no,
Seinfeld
no,
talking on
no.
Stern.
It was here. It is. So this guy.
Funny is the world that I live in. You're funny, I'm interested. You're not funny, I'm not interested. Okay. And I have no interest in gender or race or anything like that.
Somehow, Amy attempts to connect Seinfeld's comments that all he cares about is funny back to feelings of inadequacy she experienced as a child.
What that triggers for me is going back to when I was young, like real young in school, and being funny and having, but knowing and getting a reaction from people like, just try to be like nice and pretty. Like that's what we want from you. Like be a girl. Like shut up. The boys are talking. We're funny. And knowing I was funnier.
Joe Rogan isn't exactly Barbara Walters, but his line of questioning leaves Amy unable to form anything resembling a coherent point.
Wait a minute. Why does that, him saying that he doesn't believe in anything but funny, trigger that in you?
Because I don't believe that he's aware or looking. I think that maybe he would be more likely to dismiss someone or not really pay that much attention to something other than what he's used to thinking is funny. Like it being like a white. If your favorite comedians, the people you want to have on the first season of your show, your first 10 episodes, are all one type, then that's your type. And I don't think that you can say what's funny is funny.
This goes on for literally 25 minutes, during which Amy contradicts herself multiple times and draws erroneous conclusions about Jerry Seinfeld out of thin air.
Right. So saying that, but then also choosing 10 white male comics for the first season of his show, he's saying like, sorry, if you guys were funnier, other races and white and women, then you would have been on the first season of my show. And I'm saying I don't think that he's seen. I don't think that he's as open to seeing people other than that prototype.
I can't play the entire discussion for you, but I will leave a link in the description, and I suggest you watch it. This brings me to one of the main reasons I decided to split this documentary into two parts. The two sides of Amy's comedy and politics mirror each other. When you look at her comedy career, she has changed her appearance or comedic style from special to special. In a similar fashion, she has hopped from political cause to political cause, generally retaining only the most boilerplate left-wing opinions. More often than not, her attempts at political activism come across as desperate grabs for attention, like posting a picture of herself in an orange bra and no underwear to raise awareness for gun safety, or claiming that she was standing up to racial inequality in the NFL by refusing to do a Super Bowl commercial even though she had not been asked. And who can forget the blunder that was her Bud Light ad with Seth Rogen that tackled the gender pay gap? Considering that Amy's own political opinions range from tone-deaf to blundering, it's no surprise that she has faced multiple backlashes and controversies in a remarkably short amount of time. Schumer is perhaps best known politically for her role in the body positivity movement, and there is no shortage of articles praising Amy for empowering men and women. However, Schumer took umbrage with being included in a special chic at any size issue of Glamorous magazine in mid-2016. According to her, plus size starts at size 16, and she goes between a size 6 and a size 8, a problem she would remedy in later years. This kind of hypocrisy crops up repeatedly when you look into Amy Schumer's background. Even though her career revolves around being a promiscuous alcoholic, Amy becomes incredibly offended when anybody else makes a comment about her sex life, or even the fictional character she plays in a movie.
Lot of leg.
Do you have the word skanky in America?
We do have that word.
Yeah,
maybe we shouldn't have
What
used
made
it
you
then.
think about your mom?
Yeah.
Why did she just pop in your mind?
She didn't wear a skirt all
She
the
didn't
time,
wear a
so length
skirt?
wasn't really an issue.
Oh, okay.
No, but no, come on. That's the character of the movie. I'm not trying to offend you. It's how
Whatever
it rolls.
you're trying to do, you are. That's a rude question.
Well, I'm not leaving till we get the car crash moment. I mean, that's what we would love.
Well, then you're going to have to get it from your wife when you go home.
As hypocritical as her behavior in that interview was, It doesn't compare to the way she treated a young movie reviewer named Jackson Murphy. Murphy had the audacity to make a lighthearted joke about Amy's sex life alongside a picture he posted on Twitter. Amy took Murphy to task over the egregious crime of making a joke, and her fans piled on by calling him a sexist. Of course, Vulture dug up one of Murphy's tweets where he joked about Chiwetel Ejiofor of 12 Years a Slave fame. Eventually, Murphy deleted the original tweet and apologized to Amy. Although the media was on Amy's side for the most part, the tide would eventually turn to some degree. The first major criticisms came when people started to take notice of her older material making fun of minorities. In June of 2015, The Guardian posted an article which accused Amy of having a shockingly large blind spot around race. This was followed a little over a week later by an article from the Washington Post, referencing her many jokes about Hispanics. The Washington Post even compared her jokes to Donald Trump's anti-Mexican rhetoric during the 2016 presidential election. Schumer responded to the accusations by saying that early in her career she was playing the character of a white girl who says dumb things, and popped in and out of being an irreverent idiot. This isn't the first time I've heard this excuse. A variation of the excuse was used by Jim Abolish All Age of Consent Laws Jeffries to excuse the racist, sexist, and Islamophobic nature of his early career. When I made my video exposing Jeffries' history of offensive remarks, I was inundated with comments telling me that Jim was playing a character. Don't you know, Beige? All comedians play characters during their act. Some comedians play characters during their act. Anthony Jeselnik is a great example of that kind of comedian. Aside from a very obvious fourth wall during his act, what sets Jeselnik apart from comedians like Jeffries and Schumer is that he has integrity. He stands by his jokes, even when doing so may have consequences for his career. Jim Jeffries and Amy Schumer have no integrity. They retroactively change the entire meaning of their acts to appease the political groups they're currently affiliated with. They don't even have the courage to admit fault or say they were wrong in the past. With Amy, the situation is especially bad because she claims to have been popping in and out of character. That way, she can deflect criticism of past racism while still taking credit for the rest of her act. This wouldn't be a believable excuse even if Amy wasn't constantly involved in controversies regarding race, like the time she was defending Lena Dunham during the Odell Beckham controversy and insinuated that black men catcall more often than men of other races. For many other comedians, this would have been a career-ending blunder. For Amy, it was quickly forgotten, as was the controversy of her parody of the Beyoncé song Formation that came out in October of 2016. Shortly after the parody was released, Schumer faced accusations of cultural appropriation due to the fact that the lyrics and video for Formation focus heavily on black identity and culture. Amy brushed off the criticism in an Instagram post that was accompanied by a picture of herself in her underwear. Note the flippant use of African American vernacular English. Quote, "You know you that bitch when you cause all the conversation. Thanks for the exclusive release title. We had so much fun making this tribute. All love and women inspiring each other. Hashtag stronger together." Unquote. Amy explained that Beyoncé's album, Lemonade, became a rallying point for the women working on the movie Snatched. Quote, "While we were shooting our movie in Hawaii this summer, we were all crazy for the album, and also for Hillary Clinton. We would rush back to our televisions or phones to watch a stream of CNN, to see the convention and watch Hillary and Michelle and so many extraordinary women speak. All of the women on set were bonded together from this music, and from the election simultaneously. It was such a powerful time. I love how in the lyrics of Formation, Beyoncé is telling us to get in formation. And also, I like to think she is telling us ladies to get information. I did not mean to detract any of the meaning from the video. I am, of course, horrified and sickened by the events that are addressed throughout that video, and didn't see this as minimizing that, and still don't. It was a way to celebrate bringing us all together, to fight for what we all want, and to do it together." Unquote. Some may see this as another example of a rich white feminist taking a piece of art with an intrinsically black message and trying to turn it into an issue about all women. At the very least, you can accuse Amy of being very tone-deaf about race. Even if she had no intention of culturally appropriating Beyoncé's song, as I mentioned earlier, she is pretty bad at defending her political views in general. This can easily be seen in the way she handled the reception of her movie, I Feel Pretty. Shortly after the trailer was released, there was a backlash on Twitter. Because Amy is rich, white, blonde, and at most 170 pounds, some people believe she wasn't fat or ugly enough to be the protagonist in a movie meant to break down Hollywood beauty standards. There was also confusion regarding the film's message, which seemed to suggest that a woman needed to be conked on the head like a cartoon character to feel comfortable in her own body. The backlash was bad enough that when Amy was promoting the movie on The View, she felt the need to apologize for any offense she caused. She went as far as to say that she wished her role in the movie had gone to a person of color.
It's a lot harder for other people, and I recognize that I am a Caucasian. I would love if this movie were starring a woman of color who's had it way harder than me, and I hope that we get there. This is hopefully just a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Not long afterward, Bill Maher devoted a segment on his show to lambasting the critics of I Feel Pretty.
Exhausted by a movie trailer. I think we've reached peak snowflake.
After Maher came to her defense, Amy thanked him in an Instagram post that was a little less apologetic than her appearance on The View. She labeled the negative reaction the trailer received on odd projection and rage. Then she tried to spin the film's negative reviews by claiming that 80% of the reviews came from white men. And we still haven't reached the end of the controversies, because Amy has latched onto one more political trend lately. In October of 2018, she made international headlines when she was arrested for protesting the nominations of Supreme Court Justice Brett Stick-It-In-Raw Kavanaugh. The now iconic photo of Schumer lifting her fist to the sky in solidarity with victims of sexual assault led many to believe her presence was little more than a photo op to keep herself in the public eye. There is a little more to the story than you might guess at first. In recent years, Amy has become committed to raising awareness of sexual misconduct. She even went on Oprah's Super Soul Conversations to tell her own story about gray area rape.
And for me, I lost my virginity while I was asleep.
And then you don't feel okay about that. He obviously doesn't feel okay about that.
The first thing he said was, I thought you knew. I didn't say anything yet. Yeah. He said, I thought you knew.
Now, what's interesting about that is that you then were feeling bad for how he would feel the next day.
Yeah, he was my boyfriend.
Yeah.
I loved him. I had to comfort him. I also felt really angry. It was just a feeling I had. I felt really angry at him. And it's like a rage that has stayed with me. I don't think you lose that. I personally, I feel like I lost my virginity through rape. I didn't consent. We hadn't discussed it. We weren't there in our relationship. We weren't at that moment.
The problem is, the story she's telling to Oprah in somber tones while wearing black is a little different than the way she used to tell the story.
Were you a victim of date rape ever?
One of my boyfriends kind of raped me. That's kind of how I lost my virginity.
Oh, really? Really?
How old were you?
That's so fucking
I was like
hot.
17.
I mean, that's horrible. What happened?
I was 17. I was like, we were drinking and hanging out, and I passed out, and I woke up, and I go, we'd never had sex, and I go, what are you doing? And he goes, I thought you knew. And I go, what? Like, for him to say that right away.
Yeah, but, sounds like an erotic excuse.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff happened. But I think that
Wait,
kind
he
of
was
stuff
already having
happens.
sex with you?
He was having sex with
And you
me.
woke up.
I woke up to him having sex with me.
Oh, no.
It's a magic time,
Yeah,
Amy.
I was
It's
like,
a magic
Mom, I'm
moment.
a woman. I sat on her bed.
Did you have a certain glow about you? Like,
Blood.
Yeah, blood.
I had a little halo of blood around me.
It's exactly how you pictured it growing up, right? Yeah, it's just as you imagined growing up.
It was like Twilight.
Guys are really fucking heinous.
Were you drunk?
No. I was a little drunk, yeah.
A little drunk.
Well, I guess I was asking for it.
Did you feel like you'd been raped, or was it because it wasn't violent? You felt like it was like just a weird thing?
It was just a weird thing. Like, that was one of those things that, I felt really weird about it for a couple weeks, and then it kind of blew over. And then years later, I was like, wow, that's not cool.
Oh, man, you
That's not a
tamped
good
it
way
down
to-
for a few years and then came back and haunted you a little.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've never talked about it in therapy, actually.
Oh.
I think it's only fair to give Amy the benefit of doubt. Her story has stayed consistent, but it's possible that over the last 8 years, her understanding of her experience has changed. I think she also makes a good point about our society having very specific definitions of what constitutes rape. Definitions that often devalue the experiences of women who weren't raped in a so-called perfect way. But women aren't the only ones who can be the victims of gray area rape. See, there is another story Amy has told from time to time. most notably during a speech at the Gloria Awards and Gala hosted by the Miss Foundation for Women. You can read the full transcript of the speech on vulture.com, but to summarize, Amy describes her experiences with low self-esteem as a college freshman. Amy was desperate for male attention, which she eventually received from a super senior named Matt. Early one morning, Matt called Amy over to his place and ended up having terrible sex with her. As Amy cried from the realization that she was a last-minute booty call, she had an epiphany that she needed to be the girl who takes value from within. It's an inspirational tale of a girl finding her self-worth, if you ignore all the implications that Amy was taking advantage of a guy who was blackout drunk. Quote, "Finally, the door opens. It's Matt, but not really. He's there, but not really. His face is kind of distorted, and his eyes seem like he can't focus on me. He's actually trying to see me from the side like a shark. Hey," he yells, too loud, and gives me a hug, too hard. He's fucking wasted. End quote. She also admits that Matt was falling asleep multiple times while they tried to have sex. Not terribly unlike her own experience with gray area rape. In Amy's mind, one story is the story of her experience with sexual assault, and the other is the story of how she found her self-confidence after a bad sexual encounter. She doesn't give Matt the same consideration as a victim of sexual assault that she gives herself, even though, by her own admission, she took advantage of a guy who was blackout drunk and falling asleep repeatedly. He's just a plot device.
Yeah.
But then I know people who, this never happened to me, but they'll like start having sex and then the girl falls asleep and the guy finishes.
Ah, right.
That's a gray area.
That is.
And as far as I know, only one website has ever raised an eyebrow at the possibility that Amy may have committed a sexual assault. Since we've already gone pretty far down this road, there is one more story worth telling.
Did I ever talk about when a cab driver fingered me on here? He
He's
didn't
opening.
make the move. I took his hand and put it.
Oh my God! I knew it. This is the greatest thing ever.
You took his hand and just put it on your young 19-year-old.
18.
I put it on my skirt.
So you put his hand right on your puss?
I put his hand right on my puss.
Oh yeah.
And
Did you have panties on?
yeah.
Okay, so what did he pull them aside or did
Moved
you?
him to the side.
Oh my God.
I moved him to the side.
Oh, you were just
You
eager.
victimized him basically.
Yeah, you raped
yeah.
the guy. So
I know. When I tell the story, I say I let a cab driver finger me, but
Yeah,
really
no.
I took his
Yeah.
hand.
you raped
Exactly.
him. So what did he? What happened?
He did what you do with a vagina.
So he fingered you.
He fingered
for
me and
20
rubbed my
blocks.
clitoris
Oh, was
until
it good?
I achieved orgasm.
Oh, you came.
You
I
did.
Came. I
Oh
came.
my.
What I find really interesting about this story is that Amy has changed the way she tells it over the years. On Opie and Anthony, it's clear that she forced the cab driver to finger her, whereas in later retelling, she claims she let a cab driver finger her. It seems like the revisionist history has worked because I can't find articles covering the scandal. Just take a moment to imagine a male comic telling a story about forcing a female cab driver's hand onto his penis and making her masturbate him until he orgasmed. Louis C.K. almost lost his comedy career because he masturbated in front of women who gave him permission. The Daily Beast, Vulture, and a dozen other rags are still publishing fictitious articles that portray Louis as a sexual predator who jerks off on women against their will. But Amy Schumer straight up admits to sexual assault, and there isn't a peep. I'm not advocating for journalists to destroy comedians' careers, but at least be consistent. There are questions that are inescapable when you look at Amy's career as a whole. Where did this power come from? Why is she so untouchable? How can one person be involved in so many controversies, yet face no long-term consequences from the same people that want to destroy someone like Kevin Hart over his old tweets? I've seen a lot of people say that she is being protected by her, air quotes, uncle, Chuck Schumer. It's an appealing theory if you already dislike Chuck, but I don't buy it. From what I've read, they barely know each other. Chuck isn't even Amy's uncle. He's her dad's cousin, and apparently they were so estranged that they didn't even know about each other for years. It's a misconception that Amy even had to put to bed at one point.
I don't think he even knows that I'm really alive. I don't think he knows I'm a comedian unless somebody's been like, should we kill her?
But it's just going to be a problem. She's got your name.
But I have this joke in my set where I say I talk about false advertising. I'm like, Reese's, there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. I'm like, tell it to my uncle. He used to put them in my underwear. And people online were like, she should be careful with that joke. And I'm like, he's not even my uncle.
I could be wrong, but I just don't think Chuck is pulling strings for Amy behind the scenes. And what about friends of Amy, such as Lena Dunham? She's one of the few comedians who have stepped in shit more times than Amy. She admitted to molesting her sister and is almost universally hated, but still retains a strangely protected position in the entertainment industry. Is Charlie helping her too? I think the reason comedians like Schumer and Dunham retain their presence in Hollywood is because they're valuable tools to push a specific agenda. If you've been a fan of comedy, especially stand-up comedy, for a long time, you've most likely noticed the changes taking place in recent years. The jokes comedians could get away with 10 years ago would be almost unthinkable in today's climate. If you don't believe me, go watch Louis C.K.'s Deer bit from Chewed Up, and try to imagine a modern comedian of Louis' caliber getting away with that material. The censorship has gotten particularly bad in the last 2 to 3 years. You can speculate as to why this happened. Personally, I think it was a reaction to the election of Donald Trump and the rise of the alt-right. Recently, there's been a pretty concerted effort to deplatform and exclude individuals with conservative ideas. This is especially true on the internet and in comedy. Regardless of the motive, it's hard to ignore the changes that have taken place in the last few years. Louis C.K. was a massive Hillary Clinton shill, but it counted for nothing when he could be sacrificed for the sake of the Me Too movement. When he decided to return to comedy before the self-appointed moral arbiters at Vulture and the Daily Beast deemed appropriate, they did everything in their power to shut it down. This didn't stop Louis' shows from selling out or prevent audiences from laughing at his jokes, which further enraged the moral arbiters and provided every talentless hack with an opportunity to join the dog pile. The problem for Amy is that I don't think she has a genuine fan base like Louis. So much of her public persona is now built around politics and feminism that a CK-style takedown would be utterly devastating. Perhaps that is why Amy has rushed into marriage and pregnancy. Yes, it could be Schumer once again pivoting into a different comedic style. She'll probably be able to milk multiple specials out of married life and motherhood. But more importantly, it might be an insurance policy. A way for Schumer to cultivate a new identity and a genuine following she can fall back on in the event that she outlives her value as a political mouthpiece. Of course, there is so much more that could be said about Schumer. You could talk for hours about every dumb little scandal or controversy she's been involved with. But I really don't want to talk about her anymore. This video taught me an important lesson. There is a temptation to make videos that will bring views to your channel, but it's not worth it if you don't care about the topic you're covering. I hit a wall with Amy Schumer. The process of making this video has been by far the worst I've experienced. There is something so frustrating about having no enthusiasm for a project, and I don't want to make that mistake again. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking and subscribing. I know it took a lot longer than any of us would have wanted, but that is just the way she goes. I hope you enjoyed the product of my frustration and mental anguish. And if you want to support my channel, check out the links in the description. I would also like to give a special thanks to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you, Unfortunate Mishap, Lara Williams, Mersh, Adam Carey, Danny, SF69er, The Love from Up Above, Jeff Carpenter, Andrew Owens, Mo Dowd, Yuko, Kevin Howard, Thomas Strahi, Jackie, Irina Volkova, Jack, Bone CK, Wrestling Soup, and James Taylor.